Hey guys, it's Robert Gardner with the Robert Gardner Wellness Podcast. Really happy to see you guys again. I'm here with Deryl Markgraf. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Perfect.
Nice. Deryl is extremely knowledgeable about hogs, and I spontaneously started drooling the other day having a phone call with him. Deryl, I'm just going to give you the stage and let you start to chat about what you're interested in. You know Jeremy from the previous podcast, different kind of perspective on hogs. So let's go ahead and chat about that.
Yes, Jeremy's a great guy. He gave you a lot of good information. He's been involved for a long time, got a good business up there. For me, let me give you a little bit of background. I'm a 25-year business owner, hunted extensively since about I was 12 years old, and it's been on and off. I'll be 67 in January, so 55 years or something like that. I've been hunting at night for about 15 years, a little over probably. I started out using colored lights, moved to the I2 night vision. It's kind of like the military stuff you see with the green and all. Then I went to digital and then ultimately thermal, which is where everybody goes. I had bought the first commercially available digital night vision, the first commercially available thermal. Now, the commercially available thermal first ones out there, the top end was like 13 grand. People always wonder, when are they going to get cheaper? Well, they have. They've gotten a lot cheaper. You can buy a nice little scope now for $2,500,
Yeah.
So it changed a lot over the years. I use night vision for navigation some nights not. I prefer no lights at all. The best I can do with no light is what I want to do. I've owned products from probably almost all the manufacturers out there. At any one time, I keep 6 to 8 thermals. That seems to be as much as I want to deal with. I've done a lot of guiding for different organizations, church stuff, veterans group, outfitters, you kind of name it, whatever. I have a patent holder in the industry, and I was one of 5 or 7 people that fought the warfarin thing in Austin to keep from putting poison all over the pastures of Texas.
Yes.
So thoroughly involved with that, tons of research. So the next thing is I think we talk about pigs as a problem. You'd be a fool to say that they're not a problem in Texas. They are. And they are for mostly the agriculture, the ranchers, little less, but agriculture is really getting killed by it. Are they everywhere? Well, they say they're in every county or nearly every county, but you can go into some counties. So this idea that we're overran, I get people that come down to hunt and they expect to walk over a little ridge and it'll be pigs as far as they can see. It's like buffalo in 1840. It's typically not that way. So they watch YouTube and they think that's what they ought to see. Now, you might see that with Jeremy, but not everyone. Part of the thing that's kind of happened out there is when Sid Miller was agriculture commissioner, he wanted to introduce poison, this warfarin, it's called kaput, from a company called Symmetric. Well, the big ag, the big grain, Texas Farm Bureau, they're pushed by their members. They want a solution. And so none of them bothered to really research this. When we would go to meetings, their side would always just say, we got pigs, we want them gone. But are you guys looking at what this can do? You looking at, any non-targeted species issues? Are you looking at, does it even really work? And we never could get that response from them. They never wanted to sit down and talk about it. And some of them, quite frankly, in these meetings, they got upset because they were going to be dealers. So follow the money. When Symmetrics had a lab it was a husband-wife team. One was president of one was president of the other, and vice versa. Each one, they flipped. Well, of course, Genesis is going to put up a nice little study because they want to sell the product from Symmetrics. They did a study in 2015 in Texas. They saw 354 hogs. They claimed to the EPA a 97% efficacy. So we looked at their study and they found 28 dead hogs. They also said in their study that 13 of them were hogs that had been killed by hunters. So they claimed to have killed 15 out of 354 That's not 97%. That's more like 5%. I asked Richard Poche, the president owner at the time of Symmetrics, one-on-one in a meeting in Waco. I was in front of a large group. I've got it recorded. I asked him, so what happened to the rest of the hogs? And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, what happened to them? Where'd they go? I mean, y'all said you walked hand to hand across these pastures, and these are the hogs you found. He said, well, they died. Well, if they died, where are they? I don't think they died at all. I think pigs are nomadic. They don't like new stuff. They don't like new smells, new tastes. They will avoid them. They eventually get used to some. But I think in this case, they also learn about what hurts them. I think in this case, they left. That's all. They didn't, I mean, where you couldn't find any, you didn't see vultures anywhere. So those kinds of things, you're wanting, you got Texas Farm Bureau, the big ag people, you got big grain, all buying off on this product. You got all these landowners, they want a solution, but nobody's listening to what this thing doesn't work. Let me give you one step further. I've got a little piece of paper here, a cheat sheet. They brought in 93 feeders, okay? These feeders that they used cost between $220 and $400. I'm going to say they used the cheap one, although they tell you to buy the more expensive one because the other is lighter. So $220 for 93 feeders is $20,460. They used 1,707 pounds of the kaput bait. Okay, that's a retail price of $6.72 a pound. It's $11,471.04. It's almost $32,000. Now that doesn't count the corn. They load the feeders with corn to get the hogs used to coming, or their labor, or their expenses to be there. But that's $32,000 to kill what is 15 pigs. Now your landowner doesn't know that. He's going to buy these products expecting them to work. So eventually we were able to get a rider into the legislation that stopped it for till the next legislative session. I think it got expired this time. Nobody fought it. It could be back out there. So I hate the idea of poisons. I think we could find something. Sodium nitrite. Texas Parks and Wildlife's been working on that for over a decade. Having a trouble with a feeder, it spills. So they set up about 3 years ago up here in North Texas to do a field trial. Killed about 200 birds in the first couple of days and had to stop. They're back working at it, but to me, it will kill them within about 90 minutes. Warfarin, that we were talking about a while ago, the kaput, Australia banned it because they would hear up to 30 days, they would hear the pigs out in the woods just wailing in pain. So they just totally banned it. You try to get this information to people, you try to why don't y'all go read a little bit? You want to listen to pigs wailing all night, but think of that expense. That's a lot of money to try to kill a few pigs. There's got to be better ways.
What do you think is the solution? When I talk to Jeremy, this is a new topic to me, so it's not something I feel I can't throw my hat in the ring. I'm learning from you guys. He thought there was a combination of trapping and hunting that had to be used to be able to keep the hogs at bay, to make it manageable. What do you think needs to be done? What are your solutions? Because you know it from the inside.
Right. I don't disagree with what Jeremy says about that. I think the most effective way in many of the land areas in Texas, we've seen it over and over. A good friend, Andy Anderson, has a company, Executive Outdoor Adventures, up in Bowie. He runs helicopters. He does all kinds of night hunts, this and that and the other. There's no doubt that using the helicopters, he does a great job. They kill hundreds and hundreds of pigs a day. It is not always effective. If you get like along some of these rivers where it's thick, or anything that's got really heavy forested or thick growth, the pigs learn not to come out of it. So the helicopter is not effective there. But by and large, you can kill more with that. Trapping is second, and I think Jeremy talked about that. You got to have a professional trapper. You know, Joe with his trap is not going to get the job done. They got to know what they're doing, and they can kill a bunch of them, or not kill them, trap them, and then ultimately they sell them. That's another piece of the problem here, is they get almost nothing for these hogs. They're spending their gas and they're buying the traps and doing all this, and the trappers have often put their traps up, quit trapping. They just not getting paid enough, you know, by the buyers to do anything. So that's effective. Third is hunting with thermals at night. My feeling is most often it scatters them more than it, you know, anything. I mean, out of all the people I've taken out, they're more often to be somebody that's standing there and I can get them 40 yards from a hog and these dogs standing still and they still miss. They're not going to hit them running. There are a few people out there, but by and large, most hunters are not capable. So the hogs spread out. Andy did have a large pasture up there on the Red River. And we got on that pasture within 5 months, only hunting at night with thermals. There was not a hog on it. Would not come back out there. They learned not to go there, but they weren't all dead. Hundreds of them were, but they weren't all dead. They just left and wouldn't come back to that area. There's the problem, though. You just moved them somewhere else. You didn't get rid of them. So I think those three together, and maybe more people, allowing more people access that actually know what they're doing instead of just some uncle or, you know, whatever. I think you can do that. I think sodium nitrite has a possibility of helping lower it. Now, when you introduce poison, you affect other things. When they introduced kaput, when he uttered the word, said kaput, we had containers of feral hog meat that shipped to Europe. That meat went bad sitting on the docks because the minute they heard poison, they didn't know. They don't know if it's gone, if it's, you know, what's going to happen. So they wouldn't use it. And I'm sure there must be back to it. But so you introduce that to kill them, well, then you probably kill quite a few, but are you ever going to kill what you need to kill? One of the things, here's where I'm a bit different. I mean, a friend of mine, he's down in Austin. He's got a restaurant, Dow Dewey, Daidue. Jesse Griffiths is very knowledgeable on these things. And he and I agree on this, is that we need to do more in this state about making the wild hog meat available for human consumption. If we can move to that, it can be a pretty large industry. There's demand. I put my foot in it a little bit. That demand is huge, but we're not producing it. And we only have maybe about 5 processors, USDA processors in the state that will process wild hogs. So if we were able to start working on that, thousands and thousands of hogs, people say, well, it's not cost effective. I kind of get it under our current system where you got a guy trapping them. He's got to sell them to this guy, and this guy transport, got to pay the guy to transport. Then goes the processor got to process. You got too many steps in there. Yeah. But you can streamline that and make it cost effective. So I think that would be another place that would offer job opportunities, people doing the processing of the hogs. It would be business that money could be made off of them. And dang gummit, the meat is good. You know, I mean, and that's where you kind of run into a little bit of ignorance with it too. A lot of people just say, I kill the nasty things and leave them in the pasture. Well, you just haven't educated yourself. You don't understand how good they can be. You know, I sent you a few pictures of what it can be. And I've got a good friend that the thing on Food Network, Chopped. He was a Chopped champion. And we brought some foodies in here, and these people were blown away, you know. So I think that's part of it. I mean, we're not going to do a whole lot more hunting just the way we are right now. We need more property to open up to allow the helicopters home. Need some working between landowners that want them gone. But we need to be able to talk, you know, and that's what's been difficult in these meetings. So it's kind of where I'm at. My interest in cooking with them was from the first time I shot one.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll see out there on the pages is every time you want to talk about it, they will throw it on the smoke, throw it on the smoke, throw it on the smoke. Well, after a while, that gets old. You know, it's like I want to do something else. And that's where I kind of started experimenting, trying to do more stuff. I'm still learning. I've been doing it a long time now. This meat is incredible. It's the most, for me, it is a meat that you can do so many ways and with so many flavors. Mine has no gamey flavor to it. You know, everybody that ever eats it seems to enjoy it, you know. So that's kind of where I come from now. If I raise the deal of cooking them out there on some of these pages, people just beat you down, you know.
Why is that?
Well, I'll say it in one word from mine is it's just ignorance. They don't know. They haven't done it. It's somebody told them this and now it's true, but they have not. Some of it's late. I think is laziness. They don't want to process them. They don't want to learn how to do it.
There's work involved. I mean,
there's work.
This is my guess. Like when I talked to you and you said pancetta, I was like, whoop, okay, hold on. I need to have a longer conversation. I'm infinitely interested in charcuterie and like Italian and French derivatives of like salumi, salamis, pepperoni, and I'm like pork, wild pork in Texas. And I'm going, man, why isn't there like if we have a wild hog problem, why isn't there a Texas version of jamon, which is huge in Spain?
Yeah. Yes.
And then it's like, I don't know, this is where I get confused with you and Jeremy, because I'm not a hunter. I don't come from a hunting family. I'm very interested in learning, but I don't have the sort of social connections as of yet to, you know, get a gun, get a hunting license, go out. I'm a huge foodie. I did stuff for years and people would just have like, this is me, beef bourguignon. I'd make beef bourguignon for a group of people. I'd get some local grass-finished beef, a brisket, cube it up, you know, make the beef bourguignon. And people were like, dude, what in the world? And it's like, oh, well, the stock is homemade. And they're like, you realize they've never made a beef stock. They don't know how to make a beef stock. And what it's like, yeah, they're happy to eat it, but the amount of labor that goes into producing something like that isn't something that the average person wants to go into. When you put up photos of the food you made and I start looking at mortadella and you go, what the hell is mortadella? And it's like, well, it's like fancy bologna. If you want to call it that.
Exactly.
There was nothing about the food that you showed me that I was like, I wanted everything. It was amazing. And I think using the food, the gustatory pleasures of the table is something that draws people into the conversation. They're actually interested in it because, well, who doesn't enjoy a nice piece of ham unless you have reasons you don't eat pork? For me, it was everything about its sustainability and management. And then you were helping solve a problem by putting good food on your table for your friends and family. That seemed like the perfect solution in a sense. I was actually surprised to find out how sort of controversial some of it could be. From other cooking groups that I'm in, I'm actually surprised at how little time people spend cooking at all. That art form has changed. We're not spending as much time gardening, farming, canning, preserving, smoking, you know, things, preparation methods that take a long time. Some of that has fallen by the wayside as we have more and more access to large commercial scale agriculture and food production. The artisanal component of what you were doing, complete geek. I was like, I wanted to pull you aside and go, I need time and tutelage to be able to study how to do this, because when I think about commercial pork, one of the things that's happened with my diet is I'm mainly at this point eating a carnivore diet. It's mainly meat and fat, particularly beef. My body responds inordinately well to this. I've had chronic pain problems from joint pain that went away within 6 weeks eating this way. But one of the things I've noticed is I'm more cautious about commercially raised pork. And I'm not sure if it's the pork itself or if it's something in the diet because they're just fed, you know, corn. But I'm assuming that a grass-finished, if you want to call it pastured pork, which wild hog would be, I don't know if my body would have a different response to that. So it was this collision of forces in my world, where it was like good eating, health, sustainability, learning more about Texas, and this artisanal culture where you were getting into making these things yourself. I would be the first one sitting there with casings helping you make sausage and learning every little detail, because people don't understand, like when you make sausage, they make those jokes about what's it, sausage and laws. You don't want to get involved in how they're made.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you control the grind and you control the spices, you control the texture. You can alter it in various ways. So for instance, I grew up in Louisiana where pork and chicken and seafood is more common. As soon as I talk to my brother about pork, he's like, "Ooh, could you make andouille?"
Yeah. Yeah. There anything you can make with domestic, you can make with feral. There's no doubt about it. The thing with the feral though is it's much cleaner meat. Let's look at some numbers here. Let me give you some numbers. This will pique your interest because of your thought about domestic and how you're affected by it. This is for a 3.5 ounce serving, okay? Wild boar cholesterol in milligrams, 55, beef, 62, pork, 71, okay? And chicken is 57. I mean, wild boar is lower in cholesterol than all three. Okay, let's talk about protein. Same portion in grams, 26.1 grams of protein for the wild boar, 19.6 for beef, 16.6 for pork, domestic pork, and 20.5 for chicken. Beats them all. It's got more protein to it. Saturated fat in grams, 5.2 for the wild boar, 11.2 for beef, 22.5 for domestic pork, and of course the chicken beats them. It's at 4.3. But take a wild boar, 5.2 in saturated fats compared to 22.5 in a domestic. That's a big difference, And the unsaturated fats, it's 2.9 for the wild boar, 4.1 for the beef, and 8.3 for the domestic. Much cleaner meat, much cleaner, much healthier meat.
When you take out a hog and you're thinking about processing, when you go out into a stand, it's a sounder. Is that the group of pigs?
Yes, right.
So you're using night vision. You get the sounder in your scope. Do you pick the piglet or do you pick the full-grown hog?
Depends on what I'm wanting at the time for meat. We can't keep every hog we kill, by the way. I don't even do that. I can't do, we just can't. But I can't tell you the last time I sit in the stand. I always spot and stop, walk around, whatever. We spot them and go to them. But if, your younger, smaller pigs will be more tender, and there's a lot less meat. If I want things like if I'm going to try to get some ribs or for sure pork bellies, getting bellies off feral hogs is pretty difficult. You can get them in the winter when they're fattened up off, bigger sows. And that's about the only time you can really get some pork belly out of them, because in the summer they run so much off and they're just not, there's not much belly there. And the ribs don't have a lot of meat on them. They'll be a lot better. The bigger hogs, the smaller hogs, there's almost nothing there. So if you want to cook a whole smaller hog, if that's what you're going to do on a smoker or whatever, then smaller pigs. But I look at it every time as to the size of the hog as to what I'm going to make with it. I may not even know that when I take them. I'll know in my mind, hey,
what are the things most hunters are taking? The loins, and they're taking like the shoulders of the hams.
Yeah,
and that's it, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Now, there are a lot of people that still, will hang them and try to take everything they can off of them. Hey, I get it. I do not gut any of mine. I do the gutless method. Glenn Guest put up on his Hog Zombies YouTube page, real good video on being able to process a hog in 10 minutes. I mean, that got my attention because I can get rid of that hog and be moving on really fast. And I've learned to do do it very well. You don't get a lot of shoulder meat on feral hogs the way you would think of it with, pork butts or something like that. But you still get enough out of there. You make carnitas and things like that. The hams you can do so many things with, and not a lot of people use them for making a holiday type ham, curing them and whatever. But I've made quite a few of them, and it's some of the better ham you'll get out there. It's very good made that way.
When you're taking a hog, you're selecting almost for like cuts, size, age, depending on what your desires are. What are the things that you wish hunters were making with wild hog that they're not currently looking at, maybe because it's labor intense?
Well, I think it's just an overall thing of making use of the meat. It doesn't matter so much what cut or what they would do more, but try and learn something out of it. I just came from a different generation. A lot of the younger guys don't seem to have it the same as the older guys, in the sense of, my dad said, if you're going to shoot and kill it, you need to eat it. We can't do that with pigs, and I don't think of that every time I shoot hogs, because we got to keep the numbers down. So sometimes we're just trying to get the numbers down, and we're just killing hogs. So I think that if they just try to broaden their horizons a little bit, and not just think of throwing things on smokers, and go get yourself a grinder and make some sausage.
I'm with you.
Because it's really, sausage is fairly easy to make, and you'll love it. Around our house, we spaghetti and meatballs or lasagna. It's all with, I make Italian sausage. That's what we use in those dishes. And I mean, I look back on using beef and I think, God, how bland that was. It wasn't very good. So I don't think of a specific thing. I just think of, I wish more people would learn to give it some effort, or try to give it some effort. People have a lot of excuses why they don't, but I think if you did, you'd learn to appreciate it.
I got to figure out what I got to do, and I know I don't need a hunting license now. Jeremy informed me of this, to hunt hogs. I got to get a hunter's license and a weapon, and take a gun class or whatever I got to do to hang out with you guys and do this. I am my every little geek synapse in my brain. And it gets excited because I'm also dealing with food items and products I cannot go purchase.
Right.
I would do stuff. I had a home and I had a little organic garden, and I taught myself just enough organic gardening from the internet, vermicomposting, and I would grow lettuce, and I'd grow like heirloom variety of vegetables and radishes and some deer tongue leaf lettuce. And when we'd have dinner, I'd say, do you guys want salad? And they're like, yeah. And I'd go out and pick some radishes and some lettuce from the front yard, which was where my garden was. And everybody would just freak out because the texture and the flavor profile of just trash vegetables. I mean, these are radishes. Radishes aren't anything to write home about, right? The combination of like textures and flavors, you couldn't go purchase the salad I just picked out of my front yard. And then when I saw the photos of what you were doing, it just blew my top off. Like, I couldn't believe this was right under my nose here in Texas, and I had no contact with it at all.
Right. Well, the thing too is, a lot of people want to throw a can of this and a can of that in there. What you see there is all made from fresh ingredients. You lose flavor out of it in a can, And so that's another part of it, is people don't want to take that time, and it's an extra expense. It's just not for everybody. I think in the end, it's something you got to want to do. And there's a lack. It's amazing, a state like this, there ought to be more schools that are teaching what to do. Jesse does a school down there, but it's limited. I mean, and I went to it. It was very good. I enjoyed it. I really didn't go for. He takes you through everything. You hunt, you hang it up, and you skin it and gut it, and they let it hang in a cooler, and then they come back, and they got a huge kitchen. They go in down there. He does all the cutting, all the cuts, all the way through it. And I wanted to learn a little more about specific cuts and how you cut them. I mean, no matter how much you do. So I got a little out of that. Biggest thing I got out of it is he makes awesome masa, the tamales.
Awesome. Oh, masa for the tamales.
Masa
Okay.
for
Yeah.
tamales, yeah. And
Dude, you killing me, man. You went for
well,
you went for carnitas, and then you had to put me in tamale land. I'm like, I'm
yeah,
drooling.
yeah. You know, it's everything about all this is fresh. You know, it's not been processed anywhere. You don't have all the antibiotics and hormones and steroids and all that kind of stuff in it. You know, it just the meat's much fresher. But you know, he does do a good school. I don't know if he's doing the long school still, but Jesse's a great guy. He's fun to work with, and we need more of that. There has been some talk about doing field to table stuff around. Problem is, it's just so time consuming to get through one dish. We can cook for 19 hours straight here. That's doing one dish, you know. And we can do a lot of stuff like that, and but it's just a lot of time. So people got to be willing to go for multiple days, and you know, to learn to do it all. So that's kind of where that's at, you know, and not a lot of people. There's a lot of field to table interest, and I think you just have to pare it down. You're never going to get to the level of what you see.
The farm to table movement is the geeky restaurants in Austin that I'm most interested in. And then you go introduce a new term, field to table. I'm like, oh my Lord. So okay, can you take wild hog? It has to be inspected to go into a restaurant in Austin before somebody can even purchase it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
USDA, yes.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
And then probably for a restaurant, supply is an issue because getting a constant supply is like, you know, hunting itself is a different, you know, different beast. It's
there are purveyors of wild hog. There's a couple, at least two that I know, three in Texas that sell. I had one of the better ones, very interested. He wanted to buy thousands and thousands of pounds of it. And they're all over. I mean, they're not just in Texas, you know, they're everywhere. But yes, you can get it. But the problem is the way their whole system stacks up is it gets pricey. Before the pandemic in New York, you could get wild boar for $75 a plate, you know, but people bought it. You know, so here we should be able to do things. It's right here. It's right here. We could do it. We could get the cost where they were, and I think when people eat that food you're looking at, they're coming back.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think the food quality is the issue. I was just wondering more about like rules, regulations, the construct and legality of giving some of these, you know, wild food items, you know, if you want to call it pastured, I guess you could, but giving wild hog to local Austin restaurants and how they could use it. Getting into this, like I'm very interested. There's a place in Austin called Salt and Thyme that I love. They are very farm to table. They have local farmers providing them with hogs from different regions and things, but it's, you know, commercially raised for them, I think specifically. And then they're making salamis and things like that. They've got butchery classes and stuff that I've not taken. But then this pushed it to a whole other extreme because I hadn't really thought about, wow, there's like wild pork in Texas. Like it's a common, you know, game animal. The more I look at it, for me, it was a little confusing because I go into I think it's Texas Hog Hunters is the name of the Facebook group. And I was a little confused as a newbie because it was like a lot of night vision stuff. And I'm like, why are they? And I'm like, the hogs are nocturnal. And you go, oh, they're hunting them at night. That's why. Like, it's a little confusing as an outsider because, again, I don't come from a family of hunters, so I don't have context for what's going on.
Yeah. I don't believe that hogs are naturally nocturnal. I believe pressure causes them to be nocturnal, and in time they're that way. I mean, we've shot them in the middle of the day. The problem here somewhat is it's so dang hot
Yeah.
all summer long and what have you. The hogs don't have sweat glands, so they stay in places that are shaded and got water, and they wallow to try to stay cool. But they will get out. They have to eat, and they will get out. But they become more nocturnal because of the hunting pressure, I think, than anything else. They stick their head out there. It's not a good thing. But anyway, I for me, it's been a thing, and I try to be a push to better ways to use the meat rather than just letting it rot.
When you take hogs, how much of it is just ground up into sausage, and how much of it is being like cured in some way for like later use, smoked, preserved? In other words, how much is fresh and like frozen for later use? Like, do you have any concept ideas on that?
Well, one of the things, I mean, it varies. I mean, I'll bring hogs in sometime, clean them up, and we'll be eating some of that right off the bat. By and large, I try to freeze them and let it be frozen because of trichinosis
Yeah.
more than anything. Because trick, you can freeze. I don't know if I talked about this before, but trichinosis, we have the spiralis strain here. You can freeze and kill it. By and large, the main government bodies say -5 degrees for 25 days. And so it will kill that strain. Up north, they have Nativa and T6, and it won't kill it. So I try to put all mine in and freeze it. By and large, I do, but that's also because I've got so much other going on, and it's just an easy way to freeze it. And when I'm processing it, when I'm out there, I cut. I always take the hams, sometimes the shoulders, and the back straps. I put them in individual plastic bags and put them on ice. When I get back, now when I cut them off, I skin them out there, skin each one of them, and put it in a plastic bag. Then when I get here, I start to cut it up as to how I want to process it. I think about it on my way back and whatever, what do I want to do with this hog? And then that's how it gets processed. Am I low on this sausage or that sausage? Because I make a variety of sausages. And so if I'm short on that, or if I want to make, uh, like we said, carnitas, or if I want, any number of things, cure a ham, all of those things come into play as to how I'm going to handle that particular hog. But, I got a lot of it in the freezer, so it moves. It's amazing how fast it moves through here, though. Sometimes I think, gee, but it doesn't stay here.
And when I think about like just breakfast sausage, it's the stuff that I don't buy at the store. I don't particularly care for it. I do get some from local farms here with pastured hogs. That's a little bit better that I really like. And I started thinking wild hog, and I'm like, man, if I ground up breakfast sausage and had that in my freezer,
Probably eat it.
oh man, I'm just drooling just thinking about it. Because again, it's taking everything I know about pork, but I'm assuming that my body would actually deal with it a bit better. I don't know why I've had the response to pork that I have recently. Pork and chicken in particular. I think if it's pastured, I have a little bit of an easier time with it, is my experience. When I go for just commercially raised pork and chicken, I'm not very taken with it. My body doesn't seem to respond to it like it's extremely nutritious for me. With wild game, I don't know how my body would respond, but I'm assuming, having grown up in Louisiana, I love seafood. Beef culture in Texas was something I had to transition into, and I find that people who don't grow up on the coast, who don't get fresh seafood, often have a distaste for it. They don't really understand what it's like to pull a fish out of a river and cook that fish and have it be some of the best meat you've ever had.
Mhm. Yeah, I get that. I love fishing too, so I love catch fish and have fresh fish. We obviously have a lot of fresh water here. I've done a lot of offshore fishing in the past, and there's a lot of that to like and enjoy too. But this whole thing is a journey. That's another thing that we kind of touched on it. It's not something you're going to learn overnight. There's so much to it that you've got to want to do it and keep pushing to learn, and associate, find people that you can associate with that can raise your level, and help you learn more. And that you can, I find a lot of chefs don't really know so much about cooking wild game, particularly feral hogs. You cook it like you cook domestic pork, and you're going to end up with some problems, getting the tenderness in. Brining is a big thing, I mean, I brine some stuff for 3 days, or so, and it really helps. But tenderizing this and that and the other, you just got to, there's a lot of different ways to try to get your meat to be more tender. And it's very important with feral hogs. Domestic pork is, it's a lot easier, And so you got to want to learn it. You got to want to put the time in, and it's a journey. And for me, it became kind of a passion to try to keep growing. I spent a lot of time at it, and so I think when you spend a lot of time at something like that, you want others to kind of get that same joy out of it that you do. But it's not for everybody. I realize that.
I'm a huge food geek. I don't have a lot of storage space in my apartment. I'm already sitting thinking about, okay, my brother could have a freezer. He got a garage. We could get a deep free. Okay, and my other friend, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, they might not spend the time, but I would. And I guarantee you, if I just showed up and started giving people meat, they're not going to refuse it. It's like the foodie thing combined with, again, this, in Louisiana, nutria are a big issue, invasive species. They've tried to get Cajuns to eat them, but it doesn't seem to have taken off for some reason, even though it's just essentially an herbivorous rodent. It's almost like a beaver or something like that. So it's one of these things where I'm like, you're helping out landowners. If you get in with hunters and farmers who want the hogs off their land, and I could take that and make hams and breakfast sausage and then start giving that to friends. Oh man, every synapse in my brain, I was so excited to have that phone call with you, because I realized it tied in all these things that I was interested in that haven't had any real expression because I live in an apartment in Austin.
Right. Yeah. Well, and yet, I don't know, it sounds like you hadn't been here all that long either to kind of get assimilated to it.
10, 12 years.
Yeah. I assure you, there's a ton of hogs down there. If you go up to see Jeremy, holler at me. I'll go up there with you or something, help you get something cut up for yourself.
I can't even imagine the conversations between the three of us. I'm like a sponge.
Yeah. I think he's a lot of fun to hunt with up there. I've never been up there, but he's one of the top that I would recommend for anybody, anywhere to go hunt with. So he's a good guy, So I'm always open to questions from people if I can help them in any way, they want to try to learn about it. I'm always open to that. I'll try to tell them what I've learned and what I know, and maybe one day they'll be doing better than I am at it, and they'll be willing to return the favor,
Yeah, one of the things with Steve Ranella, he's come up several times, and I realized just how deeply he's influenced me. His sense of stewardship over the land, knowing the species and its life cycle and all these things, all of those pieces combined with the gustatory delight of sharing a meal with his friends, there was a deep sense of camaraderie. And then I thought about the fact that, I learned how to garden organically through the internet, just by reading forums and, doing research online, watching YouTube videos. And then I look at it and I look at the culture of hunters and how it's passed on in families from father to son, and, the sort of kinsman, the kinship of these people going out and engaging in this certain, lifestyle in the woods, hunting animals, is something that I'm very drawn to. I feel like there's not as much of that in the industry that I'm in specifically. So having guy time, you know, hunting hogs, doing things like that seemed like a good, I think the reason I'm drawn to it is it seems like a balance to what I've been doing in my business, which is very heavy tech computer oriented. I get to get up, run around, hunt with some friends, have a beer, you know, get up early, have some coffee, and go at it again in a very different way than I do when I'm seeing clients or teaching classes online.
And that's another thing. I don't think any of us touched on too much is the experience of hunting at night is, you know, I was instantly hooked when I started. It's like, wow, it's so neat to see the woods at night. You know, you can actually, you know, seeing around. It's been a long time ago now, you know, probably over 15 years, but I never have lost that, just that awe of being able to look around and see everything at night. I think every person I ever take out their first time out there, they're just blown away with what you can see and what's going on out there. And it is definitely one of those things that's kind of, you know, do before you die deal. You know, get out there and try it, you know. It's an animal that we need less of. So it's not like you're, you know, taking something, you know, that doesn't need to be here because these are invasive and they need to be gone, you know, at least to some level.
When you're out hunting hogs, let's say at night, are there certain laws or rules? In other words, you can't take deer at night. That's not legal, is that?
No, no.
Okay. And then are there other species you can hunt at night like that, other than hogs?
Well, yeah, and predators. I mean, you got coyotes, fox. You know, what else am I forgetting right now? Bobcats. If you ever saw a mountain lion, not very many. A lot of claims to mountain lions, but not many shot. So predators like that you can shoot. You know, and you see a lot of them. I mean, you see quite a few coyotes. Lesser on the bobcats, but there's a lot of coyotes.
Since white-tailed deer are so commonly hunted in Texas, I'm assuming they're two of the most frequently hunted game species, white-tailed deer and boar or wild hog. How does deer meat hold up compared to the wild hog?
Well, personally, for me, I mean, the hog is way better. I'm fine with venison. I have some. I cook it, but the hog is so versatile, and it just, I don't know, it cooks better. The flavor's better. I have a lot of friends that say they prefer the hog meat over venison any day. And there's some people are going to argue it. I mean, it's just like anything else. Some people like this, some people like that, but for me, by far, it's the hog.
My first thought is deer sausage with hog fat. It's like if the deer meat is lean, I'm assuming, because I'm thinking about how, you know, just lard. Like, are you using wild hogs and just making lard out of them?
No, they don't have much fat.
Not enough fat. Okay.
Right. Yeah, they're you know, different times of the year when it gets into the winter, February or something up here in the northern part, we'll see more of them with more fat. And some years I get surprised. We'll see some that are got, you know, an inch to 2 inch fat layers on them. I mean, it's not all that common, at least from where I'm at, but you do see it. And I think what they eat makes a big difference in their fat layers too.
Yeah.
You know, the nutrition is a huge thing. But your meat is with the hogs is very lean. You don't have much fat in there, and that's why it makes it harder to make it tender.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have the fat breaking down in there.
Are you using like commercial lard and adding it to wild hog to be able to make sausage?
I don't use it in sausage. I'll use fatback that I get at a Hispanic grocer or something like that. I can usually keep about 20 pounds around here, but I'll mix that up in with it to make. If you don't put anything into hog sausage, it doesn't fry good. It can burn easy on the pan.
Too dry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too dry. Yeah. So you need to put something with it, you know. And just a regular pork burger is really good from them. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, you know, pork burgers off of these. We did a thing where we cooked some pork burgers. We did a little foodie thing we did I went out and I fired up the smoker and smoked some pork burger. We had put some heavy smoke and smoked some pork burgers. Meantime, we had cooked some feet, and the juice off of those feet, nobody had ever thought about doing this. And one of the guys reaches over and he dips this pork burger into the juice off those feet. My gosh, man, I never tasted it. It's so good. It was unbelievably good. And everybody's like, man, you got to put this on a menu. So we got really close. We just lost the supply side. Don't really know what happened to those guys. I think they got a little fearful or something. I don't know.
Yeah. There was a meat cookbook I found years ago from Hugh Fearnley Whittingstall, who is a British gentleman somewhere in England, and it was very like farm to table, and he was encouraging people to raise their own animals, maybe hunt a little bit, wild game oriented. I need to go back and look at his work again, because he's a little bit more along the lines of what we were doing, except, British. And it's really making me interested in charcuterie and the items that could be made, the sort of geek foodie stuff that I could get into. I may have to hang out with you and Jeremy for some time, and then also go to Salt and Thyme here in Austin and take one of their classes. I'm assuming that wild hogs and the butchery process just really isn't that different than like wild hogs, right? Like commercial pigs and wild hogs, it can't be that different. I mean, as far as like,
it's not. Yeah, it's not
anatomically similar.
Right. And I've done quite a bit of charcuterie around here with them. You have to, it's not like a country ham in Virginia. Those hams over there are so big.
Yeah.
And so the time they dry out, they're still pretty good sized, Whereas a feral hog ham, even a big one, time you cure it and it dries out, it becomes, it's quite a bit smaller.
Yeah.
So, it's like, I wish I had a country ham, instead of the smaller feral hog ham. I've made a lot of different ones on genomes and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things you can make, but and it ebbs and flows. If you've been far enough into doing your garden stuff, for a while you're into doing this, and then you're over here doing this. You find new interests, and this and that and the other. So it just and people come along and they say something and it influences you, and you decide I'm going to try that. And it's gone on for many years for me, but I think I'm just now learning. I feel like I'm in my infancy of learning all this, and it's you wish there was. I'd love to go to somebody that's really advanced their school or something, but it's not out there.
Yeah, this is such a niche. Like I mentioned, Hugh Fearnley Whittingstall, that book that, influenced me. I'm not sure what else is out there. I've seen some wild hog cookbooks and things. I'm assuming there's stuff in the market, but you probably have to really dig. All of this seems so ultimately geeky and fringe. It's something I'm supremely interested in, but you just have to dig to be able to find people who are in it. And then just from the hog group, I'll have to kind of talk to people and mine information out of there to see who I should be hanging out with and talking with. And I suspect also, being that Texas is such a big state, Jeremy talked about this, that the hogs in different areas, he feels like, depending on their forage, have a very different flavor.
I think it's always true. I mean, it's kind of like you are what you eat type deal. So it's very much, there's just, in our state, so diverse with that. So, the different areas have different food. I mean, he's up there on peanuts. The guy's lucky. I really would like to go up there and butcher some of his hogs and get some of that meat, and work with it and see how much difference I come up with, but he's in a prime spot for that, You're in Central Texas area, you should be able to find some places with
there's got to be. There's got to be places nearby. I've already talked to another colleague who's a massage therapist who hunts, who was saying that her boyfriend would probably take me out. I've got to figure out gun training and a few things so I feel comfortable with weapons and the like. But I'm assuming it'll develop very rapidly. I'll just have to do some research. My brother is an aficionado of guns, but doesn't really hunt. and was saying that kind of like we needed more connections to be able to do that. So I'm hoping I can kind of bring him into the fold. I think it'd be something good for he and I as brothers to engage in. And I think he's got more room for like freezer space and a smoker since he owns his home. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm dying to be able to figure out what I can do to get out in the woods with you guys and sample some of this to see what's going on. And I know that due to my geekery and wanting to play with different food items, I could completely see digging, into the literature, trying to talk to people at Salt and Time and go, so how do you make salami?
Yeah,
it's like hard salami, sliced salami, what pepperoni, like what do you got to do?
There's so many different ways too, salami's got a lot of different ways to be made. And I think that, it's a journey, and, you're starting on this journey, and, just start slow and build off of it, and once I think sausages are pretty easy to start with.
We were talking about the journey, sort of learning as you go. You pick up a little piece and add. You were talking about so many different ways to make salamis. It's not something I can go to the store and buy, and I have to dig amongst hunters who are also foodies who wanted to produce something. Like when you said pancetta, I lost it. I was like, oh, okay, I need to talk to this guy more. Like, he's going the direction I was looking at, and as somebody who grew up in a hog culture in Louisiana, I just immediately when my brother came to mind, when my brother loves andouille, and I'm like, ooh wee. As soon as if I told my brother, listen, we're gonna make andouille at a wild hog, he'd be like, when?
Yeah, there's nothing you can't make out of this stuff. Almost nothing, and I've got tons of recipe books and different stuff that I've looked at. I find by and large, though, a lot of these, the recipes don't really work as good as they look in those books, with a pile of books, and it's like, yeah. And you can even read, you get to where you can read the recipe and you say, that's not going to work, and so you wonder how it got there, but somebody needed to write a book. I haven't gone a whole lot into Jesse's. I've got the book as far as his recipes go, but
and that's the gentleman at Daidu here in Austin.
It's
Daidu. Does he have his own cookbook?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Dewey. It sounds funny. It's spelled
Dewey. Okay.
Yeah, they call it Dewey. It's something from Africa or something. I can't. He told me once. He has one. It's called the Hog Book. You can Google it, but you can't. It's like you can place an order now, but it sells out every time he's getting to load. It sells out. It's a thick book. It goes through butchering and everything. It is a very well done. It would be perfect for you to be able to see, how these are cut and this and that and the other. It's a fairly thick book. Well, that doesn't probably work, but it's fairly thick book, and it's got pictures, good pictures everywhere. So out of all of them I've seen, that's probably the best done. And it took him a long time to do it. So hats off. That's, it's an accomplishment, not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many questions. I had a moment where I was thinking about you, I was thinking about Jeremy, getting involved in hunting, and all of a sudden, all of my AV equipment and cameras turned into some weird version of Steve Rinella's show, where it was like, there's footage of us hanging out, drinking a beer, and then processing hog and skinning like all this stuff that I totally geek out about with Meat Eater, because it's so many different species in so many different regions that are treated in slightly different ways. There was a gentleman in the carnivore group I'm in. He had some elk meat, I think, and he was asking, why is the elk meat so red compared to, and I was like, myoglobin. That animal runs around in the woods. It's got an energy transfer, like oxygen to the cells. It produces more myoglobin. But like commercial hogs aren't moving around a lot. That's why the meat is very, very pale, very, very light in color,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It. Yeah.
That geekery, to me, supremely interesting. And what I know it does as a cook is it changes texture and flavor. And that's what
Yes,
you
it
were going
does.
back to with the hogs about. I was like, do you render lard? And you're like, yeah, they don't produce enough fat typically.
Right. Well, in the myoglobin thing, you'll find that the feral hog's much redder meat than what your domestic is. It has a lot of myoglobin in, but myoglobin is a lot of your flavor right there. You get a lot of people, they say, yeah, what they want to do, and I've been blasted for this, but they put their meat in a ice chest and they let it stays in there and let it melt down and leave the leave it open to let it drain, and they put more ice and what have you in there. And they talk about it bleeding out. It is not bleeding out. That's your myoglobin that's running out down there. That's your flavor that's leaving, let alone that it's food handling 101. You don't just have meat sitting on ice. It turns gray, this and that and the other. How many times did you walk into your butcher and say, I want those gray steaks over there. Now, how many days did you soak those in that ice water or sleep on it? It's just not done. It's not a food handling thing. I get what they think they're doing. They're thinking they're bleeding it out. Well, there's no blood there. It's myoglobin you're seeing. So, in general, right off the bat, that meat's good to go. You don't need to do all that.
If you take a wild hog in North Texas, you put it on ice and drive it down to Austin. Is there a certain amount of time it needs to go before it's frozen, or like food handling issues?
No. If you put it on ice, and just let that ice, you don't want it sitting in water. That's why I put it in plastic.
Water. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I keep my my meat not to where it won't touch the ice. It's got plastic between it. Yeah, you can drive it back down to Austin, maybe check your ice halfway, make sure you got plenty of ice. Take it down there and cut it however you want to cut it, or do whatever you want to do, and then freeze it. And you're good to go. On a grinder, you can get any kind of, any number of grinders. I like to buy one, so I buy good stuff, but you can get a grinder pretty cheap, and you can start making sausages right off the
dude,
bat.
listen, as soon as you start talking about a grinder, I'm thinking I need a band saw because I got to trim this. There's so many stuff I don't know about, but it's totally exciting to me as a foodie. The options that I would have, the stuff I would come up with to be able to produce, just like you said, tamales. I'm a white guy. I'm from Louisiana. I've made tamales from scratch. For my ex-wife's kids who were half Mexican, and they've never made tamales at all. And it's it was just, I acclimated just like people from Louisiana tend to do. I look at other food cultures, and everybody in Louisiana, anybody who's a cook who sees this, by the way, we all do this. We go, I'm gonna make it a little bit better.
Right.
we're gonna change it.
And many people will think that my grandmother was the best cook ever, and she cooked it this way, and so that's the right way.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of right ways to do something. There's no totally right way to make a tamale. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to make a tamale, and just because you got Hispanic heritage doesn't mean that only Hispanics know how to make good tamales. Anything's that way. People put their time in and they learn. And
I like the traditions, but it's one of those things about charcuterie. France and Italy are the two countries that come to mind. We have charcuterie traditions, migrating over into America. But I'm most interested in, what does a Texas salami taste like?
Yeah.
What is the quintessential, the culture thing, Texan, once you start talking wild hog, I'm like, tacos, man. There's got to be a food truck.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It makes great tacos. There's no doubt about that. You can go through the whole genre of food pretty much, and your feral hog will fill the bill. It'll do whatever you need it to do. You just have to have the time to learn to make it do that. And to me, it's been well worth it, to spend that kind of time and make it be something. So, but there is a cost factor in setting up. We talked about a grinder. Well, you're also going to want a vacuum sealer. If you're going to put it in casings, you need, you know, a way to, you know, uh, however you want to do it. I mean, my grinder will put it in casings, but I prefer the manual and just fill it up and run it out there, you know. So there's different pieces and parts, you know, but you need a good vacuum sealer. Now, in the early going, you're not going to make all that much. You know, you can get one of the cheap ones, a Food Saver or Weston or something like that. Food Saver, their bags don't tend to seal good. I'm not crazy about it, and I'd always have to do double seals with them. Eventually, I got out of there and got a commercial model, a VacMaster model. So now I don't have to worry about it, and I can vacuum big and little, and I can do multiple bags at once and all that kind of stuff. But that's for down the road for somebody that's starting out, you know. But you'll never get to that point where you think you have everything. You know, it's like, oh man, if I just had this or if I had that, you know.
Yeah, there's a million different ideas, things that go along with it. I can't even imagine all the complexity. And as somebody, again, grew up in Louisiana, but I've sampled a lot of other food traditions in my explorations of food, you know, Indian cuisine, for instance, which is very hog friendly, but just tons of stuff like all over the world, from Asian and Vietnamese cuisine, Sichuan in China, just on and on. I continue to dig, and it's really interesting to look at other food traditions. But then, because I live in Texas currently, that's the thing that I start looking at is like, well, you know, what could you make in Texas? Like what can you make out of local items and ingredients? You know, andouille isn't the thing that's, I guess, commonly served in, you know, Austin restaurants, but it's something that I'm really interested in digging into and pursuing. Like, I'm assuming you talk about smoking, and we smoke everything in Texas if we can get away with it. I love smoked meats generally, and it grew on me massively living here in Texas. I don't get the sense that you dislike smoked meats. You just think it's kind of a catch-all.
Yeah, after a while, when somebody's asking, you know, how to cook, they come on and they ask how to cook feral hog or whatever. Over and over, it's smoke, 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 smoke. And I did that for years. I mean, I smoked it all the time out there. But the thing for me is that you need to broaden that. And so I love smoking. I'm on another little journey now. For 40 something years, I used a stick burner. I've always loved using a stick burner. I think it's the best way to get smoke. But everybody these days wants an easy bake and pellet grill. And so I bought a nice pellet grill recently, and I've been kind of on that journey of learning, you know, what's this all about? And what I so far where I'm at with it is it's convenience. They're convenient, but there's no way it puts out the meat that a stick burner does. And that's my opinion. The flavor is just not there that a real stick piece of wood burning in a stick burner does.
Yeah.
It's never going to have that flavor, but boy, it's nice and fast. You can turn it on.
I'm a fan of convenience. As a carnivore, I have unfortunately burned out several sous vides. Like, I need to sit down.
Another thing I use.
Yeah, it's like I need to sit down and see if I can fix the one that I wore out. Somebody was laughing with me because they're like, dude, you're trying to cook a whole brisket with the thing. Like, you're trying to heat an Olympic-sized swimming pool with your sous vide. Like, you're making it run too high.
Yeah. I've got a couple of different sous vide setups. I really like sous vide. I think it's an awesome way to cook. And I'm at a point where I need to keep broadening that, you know, and doing more with that. But I mean, as far as like a steak goes, there's no better way to get your perfectly cooked steaks and then sear them, you know.
Yeah, just quality control.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, big restaurants, that's what they do. Big steak, they use sous vide. They got them full of steaks at a particular temperature, you know. You think about it, you can't put all those steaks out there by cooking them one at a time, you know. They're all being cooked at the same time in a sous vide.
Yeah.
So,
well, good.
But anyway,
you got any closing thoughts before we shut it down here?
No, I guess I don't. I mean, I hope somebody can get something out of it, you know, that it's, just try to get out there and learn a little more about the meat and you make more use of it. I think you'll be glad you did. It's a journey. It's a little work, but you know, I always say never quit learning, and whatever it is, never quit learning. Always try to learn something. So, anyway, I've enjoyed it. I hope something comes out. Comes out
I
of
think
it.
you are an absolute wealth of information and almost like downplay that. This is the most quintessentially Texan thing to me that I've run into in eons. I'm so interested to explore this side of Texas and learn more about the sort of hunting and food traditions in the state. I'm just really, really excited that I connected so quickly with a handful of you from the Texas Hog Hunters group there on Facebook. I'm going to have to continue digging and see, what's out there, because I know for you it might be old hat, something you've been doing for years. For me, just amazing connections in my fields of interest. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, look, I appreciate that. I mean, appreciate the opportunity to visit with you about it. And if you got questions, let me know.
Cool. Yeah, we can
Hopefully,
maybe
hopefully we can get together.
yeah, hopefully we'll have another one in the future. Let me go ahead and handle the folks who've lined up to do the podcast, and we'll see maybe we want to do a second one. I will definitely keep in contact with you, and if you ever want to discuss anything, feel free to contact me. If you give me
Sure.
1 second, I'll just shut up. I'll close down the podcast, and then we'll chat for just a second. Listen, guys, thank you so much. You can contact Daryl. His email address is right there below. Thank you again, Daryl, for participating in the podcast. I hope you guys got a lot out of it, just like I did. And I'll see you guys again very, very soon on the Robert Gardner Wellness Podcast.